And Ms. Mullenbeck, we are ready.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Monday, August 11th, 2025 meeting of the Board of Education of the Glenbrook 225 School District. School starts this week. Very exciting. Everyone's busy, so let's keep it short. Ms. Smith, can you please call the roll?
Mr. Downing,
Here.
Mr. Glowacki,
Present.
Mrs. Hope,
Here.
Ms. Mullenbeck,
Here.
Mr. O'Hara,
Here.
Mr. Shine,
Present.
Dr. Steinberg,
Here.
7 members present.
And I understand we have no changes to the agenda. Is that right, Dr. Gravel? In that case, could we have a motion to approve the agenda, please?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, moving right along. The next item on our agenda are board and superintendent reports, and we will start with the superintendent report from Dr. Gravel.
All righty, everyone. Well, first of all, good afternoon. And as Ms. Mullenbeck said, it is the first week of a lot of firsts. Just today, we welcomed our freshmen, and I know we'll have some of our building leaders talk a little bit about that in a moment. But one of the things that's really important for opening and being ready for students is wrapping up some of our capital projects. And so I wanted to start by just showing a little bit of a preview, show and tell, if you will. There was a substantial modernization project over at Glenbrook North, and that was the Dean's Office hallway. So right here, you see the new entryway all the way down past the SAC. There's a lot of fixtures that have been added, nice light, a lot of design features, including opportunities for us to house student work and celebrate their accomplishments in different display cases. And then this year, we launched a new, or if you will, a modernized approach to recognizing our distinguished alumni, as well as our distinguished educators. So for the distinguished alumni or alum of the year, you'll notice that they have a much larger picture in the hallway as well as their write-up. And then on the bottom of that picture, bottom right-hand corner, there's a QR code, which allows anyone who visits to see the whole longevity of all of our distinguished alumni. Over on the opposite side of the wall, there's also individual bricks that are nicely done in acrylic where you can see each year, their name, and when they were recognized. And the same is true for our distinguished educators. So really kind of going away from what was a little bit of a dated approach with pictures in very small to read print. I do want to emphasize that all of those items were actually shared with departments and also put into storage. So nothing was lost. We just took a little modernized approach. Interestingly, the same approach was previously done in some of our athletic departments where we had a lot of pictures that had faded over time and things of that nature. So giving a new breath to these recognitions. Here you'll just see a little more of a display cabinet. So we'll have the feature student work as well as their celebrations. And built in to this entire area is a lot of seating for students, including sitting in G, B, or N. And I would like to attest that I could fit into the B, the lower part of the B. Getting out was an interesting challenge, but it's very fun and exciting. Over here, you'll notice a lot more glazing and access to our college and career counseling and our student services area. Just again, opening it up, leveraging that natural light coming through into the hallway, just creates a nice warm environment. Speaking of warm environments, soon, another one of our CTE classrooms, this is more in our welding area, will be cooler because this is one of the ventilation units that we put in. You will see, especially in a shop type area, it is very exposed and present. Bottom line is the goal is to keep the area cool. And then on the second floor over at GBN, we did the next phase of our modernization project for bathrooms. These are similar looking bathrooms that you've seen throughout both of our campuses. And we are really excited to make some more good progress there over at GBN. I think my last image here is a picture of the new yoga room. Also celebrating the importance of coolness, especially around this time of year. We went away from window units that were cooling the area and have embedded ventilation into our primary systems. We also installed new lighting and also a new floor. So a really nice modernized space that otherwise would be in kind of not a neglected area, but a less focused on area over the last few years. So we're excited for that for our students. As we prepare for the start of the new year, I always like to share tips. And after traveling across the campuses today, I decided to reduce this down to just one very simple tip. Traversing 5,100 students and 1,000 staff members on and off of our campuses in the midst, in some folks' mind, of 15 minutes and more realistically in 30 to 45 minutes, that's a lot of things happening all at once. And I think it's important to just clearly articulate a few important reminders. First, for our students that are taking the bus, buses typically run late for the first week or 2 weeks. That's a result of two factors. First, our students are often learning where their stop is. And so they may not be at the exact corner, and so the bus might stop a few times. Secondly, we do have a lot of new drivers this year, and they're learning the routes. We also typically in the first 2 weeks of school realize, oh, even though we tested driving all of our routes twice, there are times when road construction happens right around this time, and we can no longer turn around in an alcove area, or we have new construction that's preventing the vehicle from getting through. So there will be some adjustments. We'll work with all of our families on that, but just be patient for busing. For students and parents that are coming to campus, remember that each year we welcome a lot of brand new drivers to campus, and new drivers need and are taught to take their time, to focus and pay attention to all of the traffic rules that all drivers should pay attention to. And so it might take a little bit of time for students to traverse the parking lot. We also start to see around this time students practicing maybe instead of pulling into a spot, they want to back into a spot. So that might take a little more time. Or just there's not 5 spots to pull into. You really have to be tightly and getting into a single spot. So just be aware, new drivers are new drivers, and we want to give them some extra time and patience. Another important element, we learn about this in driver education. Stop lines are intended for us to stop before the line and come to a complete stop. This is really important on our campuses because of the crosswalks. So when pedestrians are walking between our parking lots or from sidewalk to the building, they're assuming that if a stop sign is somewhere, that the drivers are coming to a complete stop. So all of our drivers, parents, and students, remember to come to a complete stop before the line, not in the crosswalk. And then we have an amazing security staff. They're out there, they are friendly, they engage with parents, and it's important that we follow their directions and acknowledge that they've been here. This is not a new thing for them. They know how to get traffic on and off campus. So just be aware of that, which underscores the concept. Let's just demonstrate patience and understanding to all. Make sense? Any questions about the uniqueness of the first few weeks of school?
Excuse me, what's
Yeah.
the status of the construction outside of North?
Certainly. So actually just this past newsletter cycle, so yesterday, we communicated to all of our families about the Shermer Road construction. Being very candid, Shermer Road is going to be continue to be at a reduced capacity with limited right turn lanes and limited left turn lanes on both sides of the street. And that's going to continue realistically for another 2 months. It is going to be extremely congested at Glenbrook North, especially during drop-off and pickup times. In some portions, there's even sidewalks that have not yet been poured. We anticipate that the sidewalks will be fully poured by the village's contractors sooner than the roads will be fully repaired, but it's going to be difficult. All the construction that connects on the Glenbrook campus to the outside is all completed, so we don't have anything outstanding. But walking, especially crossing from, for lack of better terms, the Highland baking area over, there's missing sidewalk there. There's temporary traffic control fixtures in place, so sidewalks are not clear, or at least crosswalks are not clear, and the normal sensors that we have been accustomed to do not exist.
So do we have additional personnel who will be out to facilitate the movement in the morning and after school?
Yeah, so our security team over at Glenbrook North is led by Kristen Wick, our Assistant Safety and Security Manager. They're acutely aware. They're working with Mrs. Bonner, our Associate Principal over at North. I anticipate there will likely be a need for additional, for lack of a better term, traffic control. And we've already started that conversation with the village because some of those areas are outside of our jurisdiction and we'll need their assistance. But our staff will be present and will be navigating where they need to be as we start seeing how the traffic evolves. But be patient, get to campus early. And as I always like to remind folks, most of our students don't walk out the door at 3:15. Most of our students, realistically at both campuses, are walking out closer to 3:30, even 3:40. For parents who are picking up their kiddos, I'd recommend extending that a little bit, let the traffic clear, and you will have a lot quicker time coming in and out. The most important thing over at Glenbrook North, because there's limited area to stage vehicles, you can't block Shermer. So getting to campus at 2:00 p.m. and already extending, traffic will be forced to move and there's not a lot of place to stand on Shermer at all.
RJ, do you know if the village will have any additional support? You mentioned you're coordinating with the village,
Mhm.
but Shermer, there's a routine of parents stopping on Shermer to pick up their children and stuff, and it becomes very dangerous, I would
Yes.
imagine, with the construction and stuff.
Yeah, so we've had a lot of conversations about that. That's not only just us, but also Maple, who experiences a similar, just in a little different area. I think all of us are in essence waiting to see how the first 2 days go to identify what additional changes or modifications need to be made.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. With that said, I am very fortunate to have Mrs. Hughes, and right now we have a pretty large event, the Been There, Done That event over at Glenbrook South. So that's where Dr. Georges is right now. And so Dr. Kim will step in for her. But Mandy, would you mind just giving us a little overview of the GBN orientation?
Yes. So today, GBN welcomed about 500 of our newest Spartans to freshman orientation this afternoon. They were greeted by about 205 upperclassmen volunteer leaders, which was comprised of both peer group leaders as well as 125 additional student leaders from our junior and senior classes. Each of those student leaders were partnered with 2 to 3 freshman students. They had a chance to spend time getting to know them during the welcome presentation. They walked around the school and provided some individualized tours and walked their schedules. And then finally, they sat with their partners in the main gym for the class of 2029's first PEP assembly. A robust team of our peer group coordinators, our counselors, teachers, IAs, security team members, support staff, and administrators work together in this new format for GBN. The buzz in our building was very exciting, I have to say, especially hearing all the different welcoming conversations between our student leaders and the freshman students asking about their summers, their activities, what their the things that they're anticipating for school, and all those different good conversations that they were having. One of my favorite moments included our marching band students and our director, Mr. Briggs, teaching all of the students the GBN fight song at the end of our very exciting PEP assembly. It was a great day.
Well, over at GBS, we also welcomed our class of 2029 for the Titan experience this morning. There was such great energy in the hallways throughout the building. It was really fun. We had 94% attendance of our 681 freshmen who learned about the Titan values from Dr. Georges, how to get involved with the SAO and athletics departments, and understand their course schedule from the Student Services Department. Our peer leaders provided our freshmen with a tour. And finally, similar to GBN, our band, cheerleaders, POMs, and student council led the freshmen through their first pep assembly, and they also learned the fight song. In addition, GBS had 55 transfer students today participate in the transfer orientation this afternoon, which was led by the Student Services Department as well as our Titan ambassadors. Then in the afternoon, we welcomed all the Titans home this afternoon for an open house to walk their schedules before the first day of school. It was a great day at South.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Hughes and Dr. Kim. My only other comment just to share is tomorrow we welcome back all of our staff for the first Glenbrook Day. To support and enable all of our staff to attend professional development and get together as we have an opening staff address. All of our offices will be closed until 1:00 p.m. We have already sent an email reminding families of this just maybe about an hour and a half ago, so they had it right in their inbox. And then our offices will open up again. To that end, members of the board, you are welcome to come hear Ms. Mullenbeck's address to the staff.
Remarks, not an address, remarks.
We will gather at probably closer to 7:50 in the CPA at Glenbrook North. If you are coming, please make sure to wear your lanyard, as most of the doors will be locked and you'll need to prox in. And the easiest thing is to park right in front at door A at the main entrance and then head over. The actual address will be about an hour long, and then staff will go into different meetings from there. So looking forward to welcoming them back, nearly 1,000 to 1,100 staff members tomorrow. And that's all of our reports.
Okay, before we move on to recognition of community visitors, I did want to give any board members who wanted to make report an opportunity to share. Okay, well, I would just wanted to mention briefly that a few of us attended the opening of the Transition Services Building this week. And if you haven't been over there, you got to get over there. It is truly extraordinary. And it was a great moment. Everyone really enjoyed themselves. And I don't think, at least I know I'd seen the photos, but my expectation was not to be in such a wonderful, bright 360 environment. And I think it's going to be just a tremendous facility and resource for our students. So that was terrific. And again, I encourage you, if you have a chance, you're over there, stop in because you will be blown away. It's really spectacular. Okay, next on our agenda is the recognition of community visitors. And I don't think we have any tonight, but that's okay. Once school starts, I'm sure people will get a little more engaged. Of course, in the meantime, you're welcome to call us, email us, let us know what you're thinking. And that brings us then to our consent agenda. No changes to the consent agenda. Any comments, questions? Okay, in that case, could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So move. I second.
Ms. Smith?
Mr. Downing,
Yes.
Mr. Glowacki,
Yes.
Mrs. Hope,
Yes.
Mr. O'Hara,
Yes.
Mr. Schein,
Yes.
Dr. Steinberg,
Yes.
Ms. Mullenbeck.
Yes,
Motion carries.
excellent. That brings us to item 6, our discussion and action agenda. And for that, we are going to start with an update on our multilingual learner services program. And we will have Dr. Anderson and Mr. Brettag address that. Oh, hi, Dr. Georges. Just in time for the multilingual learner services program update.
So as we get started, Dr. Anderson, feel free to approach, and I have a remote that I will give to you. Actually, can I just pass it on down, Dr. Johns? As the board is familiar, over the last few years, we have worked extensively within our programmatic structure to ensure that our students whose native language is not English have the supports they need to be successful. Whether that's at Glenbrook North, South, off campus, or transition services, we want to make sure that our students and their parents have the support they need to understand the curriculum being presented in order to actively participate, and also for parents to be active participants in their students' education. Each year, we receive assessment results that give us a statewide benchmark of how the state is performing with respect to multilingual learners, and also local understanding. And one of the things that we focus on is, of the students who have been identified, which students have made growth in their language proficiency. One of the goals for all of our students is that our students will achieve a level of growth that allows them no longer to require specific services in order to access their education, because they will have reached a level of proficiency in the English language. To give you a little more understanding of what our different work has been and what our work is for this year, Dr. Anderson is our Assistant Director of Multilingual Learners, and she will walk you through a little background of the ML program as well as our progress that came through this year.
Very much, Dr. Ravel. I'm very excited to share an overview of the Multilingual Single Learner Program in District 225.
Yes. All right, thank you very much. I'm very excited to share an overview of our Multilingual Learner Program in District 225. You may hear me refer to multilingual learners tonight as MLs throughout my presentation. We want to kick things off with first a celebration of our multilingual learners' English proficiency results from last spring's Access exam. As Dr. Gravel mentioned, this is a statewide assessment that measures academic English proficiency in the domains of listening, speaking, reading, and writing. A score of 4.8 out of 6.0 qualifies a student for reclassification as English proficient. And these results represent readiness to excel in academic settings without direct language services. So reclassification is our goal. To reach this milestone, students must demonstrate interdisciplinary mastery of academic language. This type of task that the students have on these exams blend together mastery of precise disciplinary specific language and the critical skills necessary for all language learners to be successful in academic settings. Prior to 2024, District 225's reclassification rate has always hovered near the state average of about 6%. But in 2024 and in 2025, our students made huge gains. In 2025, our district's reclassification rate was 12.6%, more than double the state average of 6.2%. This reflects not only our students' dedication, but the expertise of our staff and the strength of our programming. Even though our students are making great strides in English proficiency, we remain focused on identifying and eliminating barriers, ensuring that multilingual learners can succeed in the pathway of their choosing, whether that's college, career, or other post-secondary plans. This chart shows the percentage of multilingual learners as part of the total school population at Glenbrook North in green and Glenbrook South in blue. Since 2017, the ML population has grown significantly. District-wide, the ML population has grown from 2.4% to 8.1% at the beginning of this school year, representing a 237% increase. The most significant rise in the population has occurred in the last 5 years. This chart contains the top languages represented at each school. It is important because ML program service offerings depend on student language groups at each school. When there are 20 or more MLs sharing a language, the school offers a transitional bilingual education or TBE program. When there are fewer than 20 MLs in the same language group, the school offers English as a second language or ESL supported classes, also referred to as a transitional program of instruction or TPI services. In the transitional programs, ML services are gradually reduced in intensity as learners gain greater proficiency in English. We have TBE programs in Spanish, Russian, Mongolian, and Korean at Glenbrook South because those languages have crossed that 20 speaker threshold at that school. Other schools and other language populations at GBS receive ESL or TPI services. Some notable trends, transfer students continue to make a significant proportion of our overall transfer student number. So the multilingual learners are well represented in that group. So these numbers will go up as we continue the school year. For the Korean multilingual learner population at Glenbrook South, we're currently sitting at 14. Historically, we have had over 20 Korean speakers. However, we are celebrating that 8 of our Korean speaking students qualified for reclassification in May of 2025. Another population that you want to look at is the 19 Ukrainian speakers at Glenbrook South. That population has stayed under 20, but we have preliminary supports in place if we go over the 20 speaker mark this school year. District-wide, there are 64 languages represented in the program. All right, next I want to show that we have 2 primary service models to support multilingual learners in their gradual transition to more general education classes. Most MLs experience a blend of these 2 models. The first model that you see on the left-hand side is dedicated sheltered multilingual learner courses. These courses are designed exclusively for multilingual learners. They provide targeted English language development, and content instruction in these classes mirrors the standards in general education. For our TBE programs, this includes bilingual support to reinforce understanding and content access. In Model 2, on the right-hand side, the general education courses with ESL endorsed teachers, multilingual learners participate alongside their peers in standard classes. Courses are taught by teachers certified or endorsed in high-yield practices for supporting multilingual learners. High-yield practices offered to support language development are beneficial for all students aiming to develop strong academic proficiency skills. This slide is a visual representation of how the 2 service models influence students' schedules. So at the base of the pyramid, you'll see that represents the newcomers, and they can spend up to 5 blocks of their schedule in Model 1, or the sheltered English instruction classes. Usually students spend on average about 1 to 2 years in this model. At the intermediate level, students can have up to 4 blocks of instruction in Model 1, but also it can blend with Model 2. Again, students spend about 2 to 4 years in this area of the pyramid. And then once students reach the advanced levels of proficiency and near reclassification, they spend usually at least 1 block in Model 2. And this happens around 5 to 7 years of instruction. The majority of the students in the Glenbrooks are represented in the advanced level of the pyramid. Students, approximately 35% of multilingual learners that join our district begin at the newcomer or intermediate levels. After reclassification, students are monitored for continued growth. There are a few factors that determine the level of service that each student receive. The first thing, and most importantly, is the student and family preference. Next is a consideration of their post-secondary plans, their English proficiency scores, and what their prior experience in the general education environment has been. But it's important to note that throughout their experience in the Glenbrooks, they have access to general education courses as well as support. Looking ahead, we have 3 priorities. Our first priority is to refine our current practices. We have a strong, well-established multilingual learner service structure. This foundation enables us to provide high-quality support for ML students across all academic language settings. Our second priority is to use PLCs to improve services in both Model 1 and Model 2. We aim to refine instruction in ML exclusive or sheltered courses and enhance language supports in general education classrooms as well. This includes developing curriculum resources and ensuring consistent use of research-based high-yield strategies to meet ML students' needs in every subject area. Finally, our third priority is to continue support for students beyond reclassification. Roughly 25% of our District 225 students have qualified for multilingual service at some point in their K-12 journey. Reclassification is not the end of the language learning process. Ongoing support is essential to ensure these students continue to thrive academically. Intentional academic language development benefits every student, not just multilingual learners, and strengthening this skill across curriculum prepares all learners, multilingual and monolingual, for college, career, and life. Thank you.
So if the board has any questions, Dr. Anderson, Mr. Retake, or myself are happy to answer anything.
Just had a quick question, make sure I was following the narrative
Yeah,
of the
absolutely.
memo and everything correctly. Looking at table 1, since we always love playing with numbers and that's what everybody kind of gravitates, these lovely infographics. We have 330, just using Glenbrook South, for example, we have 330 in table 1 that speak a different language at home, if I understand that correctly. So on the, I guess, how many other language, and the 61, since we had some that were tracked as little as 2 or 1 language, how many other languages do we have being spoken?
So the total languages in the district is 64. I am not that quick on my feet with math, but maybe somebody in the room is. But the total languages, including those top languages, is 64 at all of our campuses. Marcelo's got it.
So then I just want to make sure that I followed with table number 3, the reclassifications for 2025, given that is just using Glenbrook South as an example is now 347. So do we have 330 that are going into the pipeline and 347 that came out and were reclassified?
So the total number of students that were tested in the spring at Glenbrook South, I'll just use that as the example, it was 347. 44 of those students met reclassification criteria.
Okay. So I was just trying to understand the difference between the total and 20 in the 2 tables, table 3, the 347. Why is that different from the languages spoken at home? How is that survey done, or what's the difference?
Absolutely. So sometimes there are students who don't participate in Access. The majority of students do. One example would be the students who are at the Transition Service Center. And in our previous school year, they were embedded in the numbers represented at each campus. So when we look at the reclassification data from last year, it represents the program numbers from the previous year.
Oh, so 2025 is for last year. Thank you.
Yeah, and
Okay.
then this new table, I've been pulling this thing every day up into this presentation. to
Sorry,
get
I was just trying
exactly
to,
right.
I was just trying to catch what the 2025, assuming they were both for spring numbers,
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
see
All,
there.
overall, most students participate in Access. There's very few exemptions, and it's one of the only tests where all students are required to participate.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
I just, more of a comment. You said we grew how much in the last 5 years?
Turn to that. It was 237%.
In 5 years?
Well, from 2017 until now, but the most
Okay,
steep
so
increase at
in
both
8 years,
campuses.
in 8 years.
Yeah.
But that's really commendable that you guys were able to turn around and address that need that quickly. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you so much. We really have phenomenal staff in both of our campuses, and our students are very well supported by their families. So we're very grateful to the community as well.
No, I mean, some languages, I'm sure where you're like struggling to find somebody that's spoken. So nice work.
In terms of reclassification, can a student be reclassified at any point during the year that staff feels they're ready, or is it like just at the semester, or how does that timing work for a student? And I have one other question.
So students can only be reclassified after taking the Access exam each spring.
So if they progress during the year, they can't move up to a different part of the model?
It's an excellent question. So while students might not be reclassified, the most important thing for us with placement is the students' goals and their post-secondary planning. So if they're making progress that isn't necessarily captured on Access, we have the ability to titrate their services to match their goals and their present performance. So we don't follow Access as a lockstep measure. We triangulate that against other information that tells us how the student is performing. And the most important thing is that the student has agency in what their post-secondary plans are and how that informs their schedule.
Is Access then a state mandated? Okay, so that's the gatekeeper, and so we don't really have much of a choice
Correct.
there.
Just think of it
Okay.
as a two paths. We have our own internal path where we're monitoring like we do for any student. And then
We have
these students
the
have the state.
requirements. Okay,
Correct,
thanks for
correct.
that clarification. My other question is, we always speak in the district about the 4As, academics, arts, athletics. What do we do to engage these students in the non-academic part of our offerings? Thank you.
Yes, so we've made great strides in making sure when we bring students in that right off the bat, we're finding out what their interests are and we're connecting with the staff members that can provide opportunities. So one excellent example that Dr. Kim provided earlier was our Titan Ambassador program. Through that program, our ML coordinator, Esther Bowen, will match students with somebody who shares a language with that student to introduce them to the building, get to know them, find out what they need to be successful, and then we use that information to strategically provide those resources to the students. Additionally, our counselors are huge assets in that process and finding out what the students need in order to participate meaningfully in all 4As. And I'm very excited to have Parent Square this year. I think that will be a huge tool in knocking down any barriers that we had with parents understanding how they can help get their students involved.
Along those lines then, does Parent Square have the multiple languages? I mean, I imagine it would have a
Yeah.
couple, but this is quite a,
No, Parent Square
Quite a
basically
list.
gives our parents the ability to communicate in their native language to a staff member whose native language might be English. And it has the ability to translate all of the Google languages that are in the database. Mhm.
Thank you. So the state, the growth numbers in the state on that, on the one chart, I guess they're growing faster than we are. Is that what the bottom number means?
Are you talking about the one with the
If you
blue
go
and
back
green?
to the other one, well, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, so that is the proportion of the state, public school population in the state that is multilingual learner. They qualify for multilingual services.
Okay, so we're less multilingual than the state is in general. Okay. And then, well,
We're growing. We're growing.
it's a percentage thing. So you get a penny, you get another penny, it's 100%.
I'm not gonna do the math part.
Yeah. So do we know what we did to change our program to get the big increase from 23 to 24? Was there a,
So in 2023 to 2024, we really examined what we were doing to provide an experience for the students where they could demonstrate their top proficiency level. So we addressed some different things with the testing environment. We also did a little bit of test prep with the students to explain the format of the test. Research suggests that anytime you describe what a layout of a text looks like, whether it's a test, a movie, whatever it is, that is going to increase somebody's ability to perform well in that environment. So we made sure to apply some of those research-based practices around how we can support the testing environment. And I think that really made huge gains with the students.
yeah, and then they feel successful too.
Yes.
Do we, after they reclassify out, how do we track them if they're still with us for a couple of years? Like, how do we follow up with them to make sure that they're still, if that makes sense, yeah, to make sure that they're still swimming well?
Yeah, absolutely. So when grades are released, we pull their grades of all the students who have been reclassified in the last 2 years, and we look and see how are they doing academically. Also, through our student services department, it's not all about academics. Sometimes it's about adjustment and other factors that might be at play.
Yeah.
So sometimes our counseling staff might bring a student to us and say, like, is there a language piece or a culture piece that we need to consider here? And This year, I'm really excited with the late start PLC structures and some of the high yield practices that we're looking at, that our teams are going to be even tighter and we're going to support each other even more to just provide a really robust service for our students.
Okay, actually, what is a PLC?
Professional learning community.
Oh, that's what it is. Okay,
Yes.
thank you. I
It's
thought a
during our late
professional
starts.
something.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
You may know it as a late arrival day.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
No, that's it. Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to see the progress we're making and the change. You know, it's neat to see when you guys implement something and you see a big change like that and a big success like that. It's really neat to see it, and congratulations.
Thank you so much.
I have a few questions.
Oh, you go first.
So, first, yeah, congratulations. This is, so I think the greatest part of this is we don't stop academic progress just because of a language barrier. So to that, kudos to everybody, because that allows people to move forward. I'm a little bit, I don't know what's the question. Concern sounds too strong, so I don't want to use that word concern. But since the students are with us for only 4 years, if they reclassify at the rate of 10%, even though 10% is great, that means that probably 50% of the students do not reclassify by the time they go to college. So question number one is, how do we track their progress? They're becoming academically good, but they may have a hard time passing the general test that everybody tests to classify for college. And then on the other side, when they come to college, we force them to pass in 1 year.
Yep.
And 90% of them pass in 1 year, if not more than that. So I have a few questions here. One is if you share that concern and if you have any data to look at that. The second one is, are the high school standards on classification higher than the college standards for classification? Because, you know, theory says that the younger you are, the easier it is to acquire a new language, second language acquisition. So by the time you get to college, if somehow you manage to pass in 1 year, to me, it sounds like our standards are looser than the standards that we have in high school. So I don't know, any answers on what you know about that?
A comment on your second question first. I would say that I don't know if most monolingual students would perform well on Access. It is a very difficult test to pass. To address your first question, I'm going to hand it over to Ryan Bretag first, but I have some thoughts of my own too.
So we look at every year, we present the clearinghouse and the dashboard report. And I don't have the numbers right in front of me. I was quickly grabbing them, but it is something we highlight that the majority of our students, when they go off to college, are not only qualifying for college ready level courses that we are seeing across junior college through four-year universities, that's the case. That's inclusive of our students that are leaving us not having been reclassified, but are going into the college. So I can definitely, when we present the dashboard report, I believe in October, I can pull that specific category of student population.
Yeah, just and to be precise, I'll make up an example for an Argentinian kid so I don't stereotype any other nationality, all right? Somebody comes here, is great at physics, right? Mathematics, physics, and so forth. So his qualifications are great. Now, he may qualify for MIT, except that his English scores and his reading and comprehension scores may not allow him to classify to MIT, although he may be an MIT perfect candidate. So on one hand, we're doing a great service for that student on par to what our community does with everybody else. But on the other hand, we seem not to find a way to address the other issue for that student that's going to take care of how he makes it into college, not through his or her mathematical skills, but his language comprehension skills. And again, I'm not sure it's so bad as it sounds. I'm just having a feeling that this reclassification is asking for more than what the SAT or ACT may ask when they go to the exam, because otherwise our numbers will be awful in terms of placing international students in good universities. And I don't think that's the case. Multilingual, I should say, not international.
Absolutely. I'll just add 2 quick points to the narrative that you're speaking of. Number one, I think we all know the trials that we faced when we brought forward Accelerated Placement Act. This is one of the positives that come from that, is that we start to see students from various degrees and angles rather than just as a, can they speak the language? Can they, is their language skills at a point where they can succeed? So that's one thing that we continue to look. There's a number of students that are qualifying for courses through Accelerated Placement Act that are simply wonderful to see. And the embracing of that by our staff is equally wonderful. And I think we're going to see differences as that continues to roll. In order to support that, I think Dr. Anderson has mentioned a couple times high yield practices. In short, those practices are essentially, we talk about 5 habits that we want no matter what student you're working with. One of the most important ones in this conversation is challenge. That how are we challenging students to the next level? How are we seeing them not in a deficit way, not from a deficit model, but that they truly can contribute if we push them and challenge them while also not stretching them too far. So I think it's just important, Dr. Anderson's mentioned that a few times, that's in direct relation to the conversation you're mentioning.
Yeah, I just want to say something I probably said many times. Families are moving to this district because they trust on our education and they trust on the work we do so their sons and daughters succeed. So I believe the data backs that up. I just don't like to see it, at least in this particular aspect. I think overall we are successful and would like for that to continue.
Yeah, the last thing I would highlight is that it does take 5 to 7 years to become academically proficient in another language. And it's a long-term process. So we give the students several tools to build out their resume as they're applying to colleges. One is we encourage students to qualify for the Seal of Biliteracy, which gives them access to college credit at all Illinois public institutions. And then we also have them in their essays talk about what their journey has been like as a multilingual learner, so they can use their story as a source of empowerment. And, prove to themselves and to others that really, their narrative matters and that they can make a contribution, even if they don't feel like their language skills are always perfect. Because quite honestly, I don't know if I always feel like mine are perfect either. So it's important that we continue to provide avenues for the students to, experience very rigorous content at the same time that we're building their English language proficiency.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
I have a few questions and they're kind of all over the place. So let me start by saying, though, that this is, another year of fantastic progress for these students. And it's great to see. I do echo what Marcelo says. I think, one of the reasons why we're seeing an increase in this population is it's probably well known that we are good at helping, students in the situation reach proficiency. And I think that's terrific because that's one of the greatest tools that we can give a student is to help them with their language proficiency. So in no particular order, Dr. Breiteg or Mr. Breiteg, you said with the Accelerated Placement Act, I just want to make sure I understand. So are you saying that with the Accelerated Placement Act and the new level of honors that we have, that we're now able to take some of our multi-language learners and put them in an honors environment that they were not able to access before?
Absolutely. And as Dr. Anderson mentioned, then we provide the language support so that they can be successful. Because what we're learning, and this is again the benefit, we've all talked about the challenges with it, but one of the benefits is we start seeing students from a strength or asset base and realizing they have the skill set to perform at that level, but there may be a language barrier that we can push, what we call a push or in type support to ensure that that student's achieving at their rigor in that area while getting the language supports they need.
I do think that sounds like a great benefit of the APA that maybe we didn't realize necessarily realize would occur.
Yep.
So that's fantastic to hear. With respect to students in at District 225 during their 4 years with us reclassifying, I just wanted to, maybe it's helpful to point out that when we talk about the models and we're looking at the timeline that these students are on, this is a multi-year process, longer than a 4-year process. So I would like to understand a little bit better, I guess, many of our language learners are coming from our feeder districts, and I'm assuming that you all work together on a continuum, recognizing that these students are going to, straddle learning environments in, say, District 34, for example, and then come to us in 225. But to what extent are we seeing transfer students come in, or students who are coming in from different districts where we don't have a relationship with the district? We don't have a lot of insight into what they do with this population of students. Is that perhaps contributing to, is it fair to say, well, maybe we're going to see less improvement with this group of students just because we don't have as much history with them. We don't have an integrated program, or is that too facile a conclusion to reach?
There's a lot of factors that come together, just like with any learner, with any subject, that determine how well they'll do. Are there additional factors that we need to consider to make sure that they land well in our district? Absolutely. And I think we're working on building that out to make it more robust. I don't know if we could single it down to that one factor, though. I can tell you that the transfer student population, specifically at GBS, about 40% of them last year were multilingual. So it is a significant number of students. I can't remember the number we landed on at the end of the year for transfer.
We're at right now, we're 55.
Yes, and of that 55, I've gone through about 30 students' records to see if they previously qualified or if they need to be screened. So it's a pretty substantial group of people that we are servicing.
Okay. And that just to Marcelo's point, to try to make our reclassification process, our numbers more robust, that might be a subset to really focus
Absolutely.
on what we can do for this particular group of students. And then lastly, and very granularly, so with the 19 Ukrainian-speaking students this year at Glenbrook South, if we get a 20th student in October, do we just flip over, or how does that work exactly? Does it would we wait till the next year? Because that seems like a lot to switch models. It seems like that bright line is very important, and I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't do that if that's what's mandated or what's appropriate. I just wonder how you're going to do it.
So every spring, and Dr. Gravel, you can definitely interrupt me if I get this wrong. Every spring for our consolidated district report, they pull the numbers of what's currently in our program. And if at that time we have gone over 20, then the expectation is that we would be ready to implement the bilingual program in the following year.
Okay.
But it's important to note that that timeline from when that data is pulled does not line up with our staffing timeline. So for example, a couple summers ago, or last summer, we had to add a Russian TBE program because the staffing numbers, we did not have that 20 speaker threshold yet, and we crossed it before the consolidated district plan numbers were taken.
No, Dr. Anderson summarized that very well. The only element I'd add is when timelines do not coincide, and this happens oftentimes with students receiving special education services, an IEP, maybe an initial eval, and an IEP is developed in May when staffing has been finalized mostly in February. In those situations, we do build in a level of contingency into our staffing formula. If for some reason that's not sufficient to meet the student needs, we bring forth a separate memo to the board requesting additional staffing. So in that case, if we do hit a threshold or identify at the end of the day whether or not we hit a threshold, there is a need for students, we'll bring that forward to the board.
Okay.
The preliminary supports, though, we have is a language and family liaison, speaks Ukrainian as well as Russian. And then we have an IA in place that speaks Ukrainian right now at GBS. So
Terrific. Okay. Thank you very much. Welcome. And again, congratulations on another great year of progress.
thank you.
Just wanted to add one more comment. As the board will kind of start to identify, a few weeks ago, we took a bit of a deep dive into our summer school program. This evening, we've taken a bit of a deep dive into our multilingual learner program. Throughout the year, our goal is to provide these background presentations on particular programs, especially as we have new members to the board, just to kind of give a level of familiarity. And I think you'll find, especially as we go throughout the year, how closely these programs, the progress we're seeing, and our recommended activities directly align with our strategic plan. So just consistently driving home the point that our roadmap that we're on is all linked back to that master plan.
Okay, next on the agenda is the policy manual customization agreement with the IASB. And Dr. Gravel will present a recommendation with respect to that. And then Matt and I, on the policy committee, will share our thoughts as well.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mullenbeck. One of the projects that Dr. Johns has been a great asset to, I was going to say you volunteered for, he really likes policy, was recognizing that our policy manual, even with all of the work we've done over the last 4 or so years, still has a significant amount of growth to be done in the largest section of our policy, which comes into students and instruction. And when you start to go through one policy after policy after policy, you realize that a policy that might only be dated 10 years ago, when it comes into becoming in alignment with state and federal laws or administrative codes that schools are required to follow, or even case law, it becomes really out of date, almost to the point where to get it up to date, you need to, we use the term sunset one policy and start afresh. And about a month ago, maybe 2 months ago, the board policy committee identified that, we talk a lot about press. Maybe it would be a good idea to have representatives from the Illinois Association of School Boards, or IASB, come in and give all of us an understanding of what press is. How do these model policies come to be? Who's actually writing them? How are they vetted? How are they reviewed? And well, we learned more than we had anticipated. We learned not only does press have model policies, but they fully support, and I would argue, encourage local boards to make their policy manual their own with a baseline, if you will, of the press policy. And so to that end, I'm going to actually transition over to Dr. Johns and ask him to walk through what we learned and ultimately what is a recommendation of the policy committee as a whole, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. Dr. Johns.
Thank you, Dr. Gravel. Bottom line up front, the policy committee is going to ask the board to vote in favor at our next meeting into the utilization of the Press Plus services to help us expedite and complete and then keep current our policies into the future. Before I go any further, I realize that I bet somebody wonders what press is. So definition of press is the policy reference education subscription service, and it's a subset of the Illinois Association of School Boards. They have approximately 6 or 7 attorneys that work for them on updating the policies that go into their press that we use as recommendations or foundational materials. And they have attorneys from virtually all the major law firms that support school districts in Illinois as an advisory council. So they produce a packet that comes out 3 to 4 times a year of all policies that need to be updated. And we have been updating our policies at a pretty rigorous pace for the past couple of years. And I believe as a district, we've become much more policy centric in amongst part of that work. A lot of times we'll introduce policy that needs to be worked on. We'll work with the work groups inside the schools throughout the district to help them understand the policy change and then continue the process of updating it. So last week on Thursday, the superintendent subcommittee of the executive cabinet, which is the executive cabinet and 2 board members, met with press to talk about the different offerings that they have. And the recommendation we have our current process is we adapt our current policies. So we keep some of our own language and then we adapt or fold into it the recommendations from press. Once upon a time, our numbering system was completely different than press's, which made it really complicated when updates came out. New administrators came in from other districts, would have no reference on policies. This was very confusing. We've done a lot. I would say we probably have completed 75% of our policies, but we have the two biggest chapters to go. Unfortunately, as we're chugging along at a decent pace, the context is changing much faster. So every time there are new laws in education or major court cases, we can see that we'll have to update or renew different policies. We've already been told to expect 40 policy updates in October alone, which that's several months worth of work for us. And then according to the IASB's publication that you may be able to get, there's 95 new K-12 bills passed last year in the legislature. Each one of those could represent a different policy for us to come. One court case that was a national court case from last year is going to require us to change 11 policies. So you can see that we just can't keep up with really a torrent of changes for our policy manual. And the problem is this risks us being out of date or out of compliance with laws or best practices. So the solution that was presented to us by the ISB is that they do a customized process. They meet with us as a district, get to know us, get to know our policy manual and our approach, and then they work on their own to create a customized policy manual for us that is largely built on their foundation. And they'll meet with us and continue to make revisions as necessary across a couple meetings to make sure that we have an up-to-date policy manual. They believe they can get that done within one academic year. So there's two major phases that we're proposing. The first is the one-time comprehensive refresh. It's approximately $12,000. That's underneath the contracts but because policy that we have of 30,000, but we felt that this was such a monumental change in practice as a district. What this does is they'll go through, we probably have several hundred policies that they'll go through to bring up to speed. Like I said, they'll customize it, but they'll also integrate in legal updates, and they'll make a migration to the IASB's policy platform, which my next slide is a picture of. Phase two is essentially the ongoing. So every time a law or a new court case would require changes to our policies, they'll look at what we have, they'll issue to us the update that we would need to have. And with those updates are hyperlinks to related documents and cross-references to administrative procedures. And it's much more streamlined. We still bring it to the board. Policy is still a board activity. This time, though, if we're using the press services, it is vetted by the attorneys that work for the IASB, and it is informed by the advisory council of the IASB. And this is, I'm sorry, it's so hard to read. This is District 113's version. They all look like this. It isn't the most modern in user interfaces. It is incredibly searchable. So approximately 2 years ago, when we went to Diligent, you heard me very excited about the searchability of our new policy manual at that time. This is far superior. So you could find words within each of the policies. It makes it much better for all users. You'll note that recently we've had students quote back policies to us. It makes it much more user-friendly if something is very searchable. Yeah, so we believe the benefits of this will bring us to legal compliance much faster, maybe even make it possible. And we can then take that workforce time of the administration, the executive council, and really work on developing administrative procedures, pushing out the information on these policies and procedures, and making sure all the documents, forms, information sheets that we have that we pass out on a regular basis are all clearly tied to the new policies that we create. Gives us clarity and accessibility, and it gives us a sustainable, efficient policy development process. So that's our recommendation. In terms of cost, one thing I don't dwell on is that oftentimes if we have a policy that we're not sure of with our own language, we can easily spend $600 on a policy for legal support, legal language, legal analysis on the policy that we're working on. And we have the big ones to go. So I know $11,320 is more than nothing, but we're spending money that we don't really clock with each policy that we have created as it stands. So, and we're out of date. Any questions? Do you have a comment?
going to suggest that maybe Matt, as the veteran member of the policy committee who's been doing humans work for years on this, might have some thoughts to share.
Yeah, I mean, first, I think there's some positives. I mean, it gives us cover. Let's just be honest, it's not just us writing it. It's press has the attorneys. You can come back, it gives you more heft in your policies that you're on the right track with them. It keeps us current easier. Right now, if you go into section 7 especially, and you start pulling up random policies, there's stuff from 2010, 2008, 2002. I think it also it'll get us better aligned in both schools too on procedures and other things, which is a very big positive. And the cost wise, I know you mentioned the $600 for policy, but that doesn't even count your time and RJ's time. And then you have maybe Barbara's there, or, Angelica's there. And so you've got a bunch of, frankly, highly paid people sitting around for a couple hours. I think we met 20 to 30 times last year at an hour and a half to 2 hours apiece. It starts to add up. Some of the problems, now it's not perfect. It's a little unwieldy. Their policies. I'm not a big fan of words. I like to keep the policies easy to read. I do like it when the students come in, like my daughter, when she was having an issue at the school with the gym, and she's like, "Oh, let me look at the policy." And she looked at the policy, and then, it's nice that our students do that stuff, and I want them to be able to read our policies, and I'd really like it for them to fix their system. It looks like something out of the 90s when you try to search their system. It's kind of frustrating, but we'll get there, I guess. It's easier than ours currently. So I think while it does cost, there's a lot of benefits to doing it and just getting it done. It'd be nice to kind of, it's like the stables that Hercules has to clean. You just got to get the hose and wash this thing out. And then you can start over with everything you got.
Jesus.
I'm going to make that reference for the
Yes.
future.
I was gonna say more like Sisyphus and the rock, right? Because I feel like, one of the things that Dr. Johns pointed out is, despite all the work that the policy committee has been doing for years on policies, and you can spend a lot of time getting a bunch of policies up to date, and then one fell swoop, the legislature puts you right back where you started because that policy is not up to standard any longer. So that, you push the rock up and it rolls right back down. And this has been happening a lot. It would be great to get to a point where, we've got it all cleaned up and we have assistance as we go through this process of updating continuously as new information is being pushed to us. I do want to point out a couple of things that, in addition to some of the benefits that Matt pointed out, is that and I know that Dr. Johns didn't have a time or didn't explain the process that we would go through for this, but one of the things I find most appealing about it is the entire process that the board, the policy committee, our district would go through with the press folks at IASB would be public. And that would mean that these are public meetings, the public would be that comply with the Open Meetings Act. So our community can be part of the conversation about policies. And I think that that's tremendously beneficial, because if someone has a particular interest in a particular policy that affects their family or their students, they can come tell us what they think about it. We don't frequently have that conversation until after the policy has been put in place. And then when someone's not happy about it, they come and tell us about it. I would rather they tell us as part of the conversation so we can take those concerns into account, because as Dr. Johns pointed out, they don't just hand us the policies, they customize them for our district. So we can give them the feedback to let them know that, we understand this is your model, but this is the way our district works, and that's not going to work for us. We want to do it this way. The point about administrative time, I think, is really crucial. We ask so much of our administrators, and this is to be able to take this off their plate, and not entirely, obviously, because we need to have their input in order to have this be effective, but to have the real, granular work of it done so that we can come at it as needed to complete the process rather than slogging through the entire process, I think will just be so much more efficient and cost effective. So those are the reasons, or some of the reasons, why I am in favor, as a member of the policy committee, of this recommendation. And now, questions, Mr. Glowacki.
I'm all for it, given that one of the main purposes of the board is policy and putting this forward. I just want to make sure I understood how the subscription service works, because my understanding from reading the attached documentation, it's still a template. Everything still needs to be vetted by us. While they customize some things, it's still our vote at the end of the day that we adopt their template or not, and may modify it subsequently based on community input and everything else. Is that correct in the understanding? It's not necessarily that it's going back to press to vet for them and they approve it, which is something that you just mentioned that confused me a little bit.
No, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Yeah, they will give us a foundational document. They will examine our own past practices, our own policies, and then make the customizations that are necessary. In phase two, when a new policy is issued, they will try to incorporate those customizations into the new template, into the new document, the new press document, and then our board then again would pass it.
So they're
upon
collecting
revision.
our version, but not necessarily adopting.
Yeah,
our
they're
version.
looking for.
That's the part that was confusing me.
Correct.
Okay.
They're looking for the significant adaptations that are within our policies
And all the
and then
members.
carrying them across.
Okay.
I suspect because of our effort in the past of merging policies and procedures, that we'll have some places where we need to separate those again. It'd be advisable for us to separate those again, but those are decisions we get to make as we go through the process.
Because that leads me to the next movement policy was issuing was moving more to the handbook and procedures, moving less out of policy. And with press, depending on, I guess, the wave that may go through press at times and stuff, they may be moving things more inward or
Yeah.
because they are politically driven by the IA, the organization at times as well too, depending on who's in leadership. Has been my experience over the years.
I would just offer, in general, the IASB's belief in policy comes down to a policy should provide an overall sense of the will of the local school board, which then directs administration to implement those larger concepts. Our policies historically had a lot of this is our overarching belief, and you will implement it by doing 1, 2, 3, 4. So I think the way we've been moving over the last few years, especially in the operational policies, will be in alignment. I think our greatest difference probably would be on the student and instructional side.
Right. I guess my concern is if ISBA and press decide to flip, we still have the opportunity to
Correct.
not flip with them and everything because it's still just a template and we adopt them.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, and with Glenbrook, with the amount of customization we've done, we have some unique Glenbrook policies that are specific to our situations. Those will also, even if a policy doesn't exist in press, if we have it, it will be created. The one item that they clarified is they have a special numbering sequence for local policies to make it clear. So we might have some number changes, but otherwise it will be embedded.
That's a wonderful tool and definitely support, having this added.
One thing I just wanted to add, Pete, because you brought up procedures and this isn't part of the conversation right now, but they also have a tool where you can separately have the procedures manual be put together similarly. And when the conversation we had with the attorney from press the other day, they very much have this mindset, as RJ described, of having, policy lives in the policy manual and procedures live in the procedures manual. And I think a lot of what we would end up with is having it become clear what procedures are currently in our manual, our policies, and ought to be moved into something like a handbook or a procedures manual. So that might be down the road doing the fine tuning of the procedures, but this focus on policy will move us in the right direction of being able to, clearly make those distinctions, I think.
I just want to offer one little other color commentary, the potential future. As an administrator or as a teacher or as a parent, my ideal world is when I am able to type in a topic and I see the policy and I see the procedure and I see the links to handbook, all in one spot, as opposed to going, handbook is over here, procedures are in Google Drive in 70 different places. I'm being very candid. And over here is policy. So one of the biggest excitements for administration, as we've been working really diligently to align our practices and ensure consistency across Willow Road, now across 4 schools, having all of it centralized will greatly improve our ability to lead and manage consistently.
So I have some concerns. We had looked at press multiple times over the last period of eons here. And it was felt that the policies were not a great fit for the Glenbrooks. And that we constantly were in a mode of creating or modifying our own. And we have put a lot of time and resources into modifying and upgrading our current policies. I agree that this weaving together of policies and procedures really creates confusion. And then students and families, frankly, focus on the handbook, right? It's the one thing we give them, and they sort of only go to the other place when something sort of goes wrong, or they ask for something, they can't have it, and then we refer them to a policy. But by and large, most people, kind of work through it. And just want to, I often feel like the things done at the state level don't fit an individual district all that well. In our case, the Glenbrooks, but not just the Glenbrooks. We're all individual districts. A lot of districts have to have the press kind of model because they don't have the means and methods and skill sets to create the policies. And our policies certainly aren't stagnant. You guys, in the last, whatever time, have gone systematically through these. And I know occasionally we also get caught out. Something will come here. You have to refer to a policy and you look at it and you go, oh, 1999, great. The world has changed and we missed this one. And so I think the press piece helps you with that. I am less enthusiastic about changing the wording that in our policy with all, those words are there for a reason. And we've paid quite a bit to legal fees, to the expertise of our staff to get them the way they are, to the expertise of board members sitting around this table. Sometimes just a few words can have a very serious impact, and the lack of those words can lead to significant unintended consequences, and we've seen that. So someplace in here, there has to be a balance, and I really am concerned about just saying, well, they'll just kind of redo it in their own image or something, because I don't think the work they've produced in the past has been that wonderful. It simplifies things because templates simplify things and consistency simplifies things. But we have gotten to this point over a long period of time with multiple iterations. And when a policy is no good, you guys have brought it here and said, we need to sunset this thing, for example. So it's a dynamic, I feel like what we have is dynamic, and I worry about giving that up for convenience. And so somehow we need to balance that, though I do wish we could take what we have and get it indexed properly and separate these pieces and get more into procedures, because that seems like the right way to operationalize. What do we have? About 200 and how many policies? A couple hundred, right?
About 1,500 pages worth.
Well, pages, yeah, okay. But in terms of numbers of policies.
200 is a good number.
So, that's a lot to digest. So those are kind of my thoughts. Thank you.
So a few comments. The way I anticipate this would happen is we have an intake meeting with the full board is able to participate and encouraged to participate. And it's a large questionnaire in which they're seeking to understand our belief on policy, our structure, things of that nature. Then they, and to being very candid, for the amount that's being charged, they have a lot to review of our local policy manual that is going to be very different. And they're going to have to go policy by policy. And I think they're going to have a good opportunity to refine their practice through reviewing our policy manual. But ultimately, they're going to produce updated or recommended policies. I anticipate then Dr. Johns, myself, other members of policy committee will literally go policy by policy by policy, not just accepting what is presented, to make sure that those specific words, to make sure that unique circumstances to us are present. Glenbrook has had a variety of opportunities for us to learn to get better. Some of those things we have embedded into policies. We've had some unique elements of what we focus on in education that might be different than what a district, an elementary district down the street here or a unit district down the state might do. And so it would not be a wholesale adoption without us going through policy by policy. So I just wanted to just kind of give that perspective of what would happen.
Do you think it would be beneficial to have them do some kind of a pilot instead of entering into a wholesale, engagement, and pay them? I'm not saying they should do it for free. Don't get me wrong, but give them a certain piece of policy and procedure and see what comes back.
We've looked at some districts that have gone through this process, and what I can't say is that I've seen, for lack of better terms, the red line of where they started and where they went. But I have seen districts that have gone through this. An area where pilot or not, where it would be very obvious what the quality would be or what the output is, would be in chapters, sections 3 and 4. Those are the operational policies that we have completely aligned. One of the things that may not be known by the full board is over the last 2.5 years, more often than not, we've actually wholly rewritten our policy aligned with press. We've adopted the press as the base, and then we've filtered in our own language as it's needed because we're at a point where there were some challenges. At the cost point it is, I would be comfortable with it moving forward as is. And if we get to a point in our review process and we say we're not comfortable activating and moving forward, we would still have that choice.
Yeah, I don't understand us acquiescing or control, I guess, or giving up anything. This is just another tool that we are utilizing as a template and still coming before the board on policy first and then the board for any changes and everything. I'm looking at the bullets in the memo. They're just doing reviews, alignment with the most recent templates. So we get the numbering, retention of our existing policy that are normed, integration of all our legal updates. That's, I think, the big concern. Did we miss anything? So there's another set of eyes reviewing it, those 6 attorneys. And then finally, the rounds of reviews and everything support. So I'm not seeing anything in the memo that's,
So
it's
okay.
a tool. I
So-
see it as a tool. I mean,
So we just mentioned 6 attorneys, whatever. So then what we're saying is their interpretation in writing or rewriting of this supersedes what our attorneys have done with us. I mean, this is what I don't understand. I mean, they have a template. We're paying, quote, for the template with some customization kind of lapped into it. Yet that's different than, hey, this belongs in section 1302 instead of, 905. This needs to be renumbered. That just makes it better. but the actual language, I thought from your description, you're trying to modify the policy in general so it conforms to the standards in the template,
There's really a.
which may be okay.
Yeah, there's really a few things going on. So let's just take an operational policy on contracts. So all contracts before the board that are in excess of $35,000 require approval, et cetera, et cetera. What they would do under that, using that policy, is they would look at, okay, here's what's in the press policy. It's an easy example because so many boards might have a number like $10,000. So they'll highlight that. They will identify, oh, in your policy, you require policies to be presented as part of a memo to the board with supportive documentation. That's not in the press policy. So now we have to take those specific procedural things and put it into the model policy. From a student perspective, when we actually work with our attorneys we have a policy from 2009. We'll take the bullying policy that we worked on last year. We actually have more and more started with press and then aligned where we were. And the difference is when we engage our attorneys, it's not as much of them comparing our language or the language or disputing the language in press. Sometimes our attorneys are taking cues from the policy committee, make it shorter, less words, make the language maybe more understandable. Substantively, there's not many changes unless there's a unique procedural thing that we've added. That's just how we've done it in recent years.
I think one of the things to think about, Skip, right now is we're piecemealing this thing through. And I feel like this is a nice opportunity for us to just do the whole thing, and because we need to do the whole thing.
Piecemeal, you mean because we look at a couple at a time?
Yeah, we do 2 or 3 or 4, and then something will come up, like, oh, let's go do this one too, and then we'll try to get back on track. But this makes us do the whole shebang, and it's going to be a lot of work.
It is, and that's,
Tremendous benefit.
Yeah.
that's one thing to point out is that the policy committee, I think I made this bad joke during our conference call. It's going to be a full court press this year to get this done. It's going to be a lot of work. And any board member who wants to sit in on any of these meetings is of course welcome to. And we will of course be coming back and reporting because we don't want to end up in May with a brand new policy manual that's been all spiffed up, and Matt and I have looked at it, and Dr. Johns has, looked at every, I and T, and it's brand new to you because the board needs to sign off on it in its entirety. So you really need to come along for the ride because otherwise it's going to be a slog. I'm just going to tell you, when you get the 1,500 pages to look at all in one fell swoop. So what we're trying to do is just streamline this and knock it out in one academic year. So we have a new starting point. And then it's not this 2 steps forward, 1 step back process that we've been through. And I've only been on the committee for a few months, so I haven't had to do a lot of this dance that you all have done. But it sounds very frustrating and not super efficient. So this gives us a chance to get ourselves in the right place and then moving forward, have a better tool as we are updating.
Can I say so? So I think it's, if we have policies and this has been, it seems very prehistoric the way we're doing it.
Primordial?
Yes. Bigger word than I can come up with. So I like dinosaurs. So this is obviously, I'm not afraid of the work. I'm happy to help. But if we look at this from a perspective of, okay, we revamp everything, right? Then trying to disseminate that information down and getting everybody on board with that and the procedures. I mean, that's another thing altogether. And then educating everybody, every staff on all those different policies, if they change. I mean, I don't know how much they're gonna change, but if you're bringing in best practices, I'm assuming there's gonna be a lot. And, are we ready to, and capable, and can we, that's not a question for you. It's just a question in general. That's another big piece of it too, because then all of a sudden you have people that are out of policy because they're around, so.
Totally. So just to give an example, we go through the handbook changes each year. And this year, with all of our administrators, we had everyone go through about probably a 45-minute, hour-long session on every change to the handbook. And we got through them. It was efficient. It actually led to a lot of good questions, led to an identification of a variety of typos that need to be fixed. But the conversation, so a lot of pages. The conversations got so much deeper than just what changed. It was, okay, so let me understand, in this situation, if this happens, this is how we would handle it. It's very, very powerful. I can say that this is really one of the first times we have consistently done that, because this is our first time we've had a complete redline version of our handbook, which was really awesome. From a policy standpoint, I want to emphasize something. Even if our policy doesn't reflect what Illinois School Code says, or the U.S. Supreme Court declares, or what have you, we are obligated to implement the law. And so we are constantly having conversations with our leaders, sometimes parents or students, when things change, and having to implement. One of the elements that hopefully many of you will hear tomorrow during our address, my address, is that we are a learning organization. And we're showing that we're a learning organization through our actions by establishing these PLCs, the late arrival times, when not only will our teachers be learning, our administrators will be learning, our support staff will be learning. And we fully intend on, as we develop new policies or change our procedures, that we are using that purposeful time to communicate it out. That we are moving away from the concept of sending an email with 100 pages of documents that people don't necessarily know what they're looking at, and making sure we're being purposeful with our time and communication. So I do believe we have the capacity to implement. I believe that we've been doing this in piecemeal because our board governance documents have been out of date. And I think this will greatly help us.
Have they ever been through this process before with somebody else where they totally revamped it? And if so, did they have some sort of a communication tool or a best practice as it relates to going out and sharing it with the whole staff?
Yes, IASB has a variety of tools, and we are well from being the first 100 or 200 districts that have gone through this. However, we are unique in our policy manual.
Revamp, in a
Very
total,
unique.
we are, but in a total revamp, yes, okay.
I think that was the one thing, not to speak for the policy committee, that when we learned how much this is not a unique problem to us.
RJ, correct me if I'm wrong. Did they say there were 600 current clients of this out of the current 850 districts? So many districts have been in this spot. My previous district, we got up to speed all in 1 year.
So I'm just going to reserve the right for, I would say policy should reserve the right that if this goes longer than a year, be prepared, because it may be more, after you get the initial review, you may have so much that comes up that we go, wait, there is a purpose here. We've got to go find the history of why was this redlined beforehand. Let's discuss it, and it might be different execution plan.
Sure.
So a couple of comments, and I'll start from the end, actually, echoing, you were saying, if we bring everything together at once, it's kind of a little bit unfair to the board members, but I'm thinking also to the rest of the community. I know the masses that attend our meetings, but some people may read these things and saying we're going to change 200 policies in a span of 2 weeks, we're going to vote on them. It may be too much, because not for us, maybe we are due to put that time, but we don't want to get into a situation where somebody that pays attention comes back and says, you are expecting me as a parent, I'm doing different things, to sit down because the notes of the meeting comes on a Friday or the required 20-something hours and have comments on these 200 policies that are changing. And I like what you were saying earlier in terms of you're bringing different areas of education every meeting. Maybe the approach could be similar where we grab sections, and once we have everything ready, there's no rush for us to approve everything in one meeting or 2 meetings. We can go section by section and then give time for us and give time for the community to give feedback for the people that are interested and have the time instead of trying to, push through everything. We pay for the year anyway, so we may start whenever this is ready and go group by group and give everybody the time to give feedback or just to look at it. And I have a question. This is going to deal only with policy, or it's going to, so how are we going to keep up with processes and handbook as our policies change?
So we utilize the Model Student Handbook, which is a publication of the Illinois Principals Association, done hand in hand with the Illinois Association of School Boards with Press. So we're already in that alignment, and we do our revisions each year. With respect to procedures are something that are somewhat embedded into some of our policies. And like I mentioned, are in all the Google Drive documents. Once we have a baseline policy set in conjunction with the handbook, we will look to move administratively into developing our procedures, one procedure at a time, which is a massive effort. There are so many documents and so many separate procedures based on departments or based on situation that now can be compiled together. But you have to have the policy first.
So my last comment is that, and this echoes part of the comments from some of my colleagues here. I would like for us, I'm saying us very loosely here because the first intake is for the policy committee, but to look at this through three different lenses. Okay, so the first one is the law. We want to be compliant with the law, and I understand they're going to let us know changes in laws that should impact potential policy. I think having consistency with everybody, that's great because there's one law for everybody, like I think Dr. John said earlier. But there's a second kind of lens here, which is the content of the policy, not just simply what the law says. And this is where I kind of side with Skip here, where when we look at IASB, and as Pete was saying, sometimes proposals that go to IASB have some requests that you think like this may work downstate, but definitely won't work with us, or the opposite, or this may work for smaller school districts and don't work with us. So while the law may say one thing, we move from the law to the writings of the policy itself. We need to pay attention that this is still consistent with what we want to do, just to make sure that we don't have any surprises down the road. My third lens is language, and I'm particularly, we just talk about multi-language speakers and so forth. I'm not talking about the wording itself, but the tone of policy, how policy comes. And I think we are, there's a difference of writing things, and these days with generative language, you can talk, a lot of people talk about tonality, and policy should be something that not only should be clear, but should be done in a way, like I think Matt said earlier, that if our students are going to read it, they don't read that this is, I grew up under a military dictatorship, so I always use the same example. I don't want a kid in school, I don't want a kid in school to read policy or read a handbook that looks like, you should be doing A, B, C, D, while it could be said the same way, but on words that are more, engaging for the students to read. Because at the end of the day, we can do whatever we want, but we want the students to read them and being able to interpret them and work with them, or at least be compliant with them. That's my 3 cents.
Law, content, language, and tone.
Yes, Ms. Hope.
I know, it sounds like it makes a lot of sense, this one-time comprehensive policy renewal. Is there, or manual refresh, is there anything in the annual ongoing support that isn't included? Things like new policies that maybe would be coming from our district or the community versus the state, or like what isn't included in that annual?
Yeah, so in addition to the maintenance costs that we see, I like to think the maintenance cost is really access to their online platform and the support to implement changes, because we don't get direct access. They take our submissions and they program it. We also, the district has historically subscribed to press, so that is a total another subscription fee. I forget what the actual amount is. We do also have a lot of local policies. So for example, we have 3 policies that are part of our GEA collective bargaining agreement. One we just recently had updated, which are separate. In any of those, we would continue to work with our attorneys. Where we need to coordinate with IASB is literally to get the new number that we can use. So we could label it what we wanted, we could put the content that we wanted. We would just need to confirm the number. So that wouldn't be included.
And we wouldn't need our attorneys to look over anything that we've updated via press in addition to their attorneys.
Yeah, so we really do a blend of it. If we read a policy and administratively, board policy committee, and there are no concerns, like it's very straightforward. We typically don't engage in attorney review. Attorney review is a pricey endeavor at about $350 per hour. There are times when we'll need that effort, and other times that there are typographical errors, alignment with the law, and we just accept.
Separate note, you mentioned that our current policies have a lot of things that them out as a part of this process to put as processes and protocols. Once we take that on, thank you. Is there a way while we're doing that to concurrently like track some of that so that when we're ready to do that, we haven't lost all of that material and it's organized and a little bit easier?
Yes. So the only thing we'd be pulling out, for example, would be procedures. So the 1, 2, 3, 4s and ABCDs. We still need that information for operating. So we do have a standard operating procedure document that includes that kind of cross-referencing policy. We would likely move it there with the much larger goal of getting it all together.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions or comments or concerns?
Thank you.
So we have a recommendation from the committee. And I think the plan would be to have this come back on consent if that is what the board is ready to do. I don't exactly know what I do at this point.
We'll update the memo to reflect the formalized recommendation, and then it'll be brought forth. We will start coordinating with the policy committee. Because of the nature of the work that will be done here, these will be, as Ms. Mullenbeck said, public meetings. I encourage everyone to come to these meetings. I find them very fun, quite educational. They not prehistoric. They are lengthy. I think I don't know if we've said this enough, but folks who are on the policy committee, past and present, it is a tremendous amount of very technical work. Sometimes you're literally looking at words, sentences, commas, semicolons. I've learned so much about semicolons. And other times you're looking at substance. But I mean, it's a lot. And so Matt and Sandy now currently, they are committing to a big part. However, if we think of the most important roles of a Board of Education, it comes down first and foremost to adopting policies, and everything else that the board does is defined by those policies. So this will be a great step in a positive direction. I think it'll help us move forward. But it's going to be a lot of work. And so just thank you to the policy committee. As we make progress, we'll bring them forward. We'll internally ourselves develop a document that the board can literally, for lack of better terms, policy 1, was it substantially changed? Was it minor changes? What's done? And so even though you won't necessarily see that directly from IASB, we will in our own analysis provide that, and that way you can see it all. But I think this will be good.
May I suggest, similar to when we were doing the superintendent transition and everything, we had the mini site for the public community to see the progress and everything. Could we do something, I guess this goes back to communication, but something to make this as transparent as possible. Show the red line versions. Here's the product that's coming back out of press and.
And we really want to encourage people, you know, to come to these meetings because it gives them an opportunity to weigh in. And if, to the extent that we can publicize, this is what's on the agenda this time, guys. We're looking at, you know, section 5 and these are the things that are going to be, you know, some people care about some parts of the policy manual and not so much other parts of the policy manual, depending on what they're.
You could tell, I mean.
Dressed up as a dinosaur.
Yeah. Lots of ways
Bill
to
of Rights.
engage with our community, so this will come back on consent then at our next meeting?
Yes, 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Thank you all.
Okay, if everyone is ready to move on, we will move on to our possible topics for future board meetings. I believe Dr. Gravel has a suggestion.
I do have one. Mr. O'Hara is the first person to volunteer to attend a tour over at Glenbrook North to see the capital project. So for anyone who is interested, please let me know. We will start, gosh, I forget the exact date, but 2 weeks from today.
August 25th, 6
August,
PM.
I have it written, August 25th. We will start at the main entrance at GBN. We'll walk through the hallway. We'll go take a look at the CPA, which received its new sound system. We'll take a look through the CTE area, go up to the second floor, look at the bathrooms and things of that nature. So it'll be a little fun gathering. And if timing works out, once we drive back here, we can take a quick walk over to the GBS Fieldhouse floor, if you haven't seen that yet. But it's just kind of an annual tour we do each year. So just let me know if you're able to join.
I was going to suggest we do our meeting over at GBN to keep things moving, but yes, sign me up.
All right.
Would anyone else like to suggest a topic for a future board meeting?
I'd like to follow up on an email I sent earlier in the summer about having wellness, student safety, and a variety of other topics identified on our calendar well in advance, at least which month we're going to address it and everything. And Ms. Lee's memo reminded me that, you know,
Yes.
that would have been proactive instead of reactive, that we see where these topics are coming up and everything, but they're very important to the community.
Yes, her letter was excellent on that point.
I was also going to bring up mental health and wellness, just to know, I mean, we just talked about the multilingual services, and I know I missed summer school at the last meeting, but if we could know, like, just sort of an overview of what the services are and any
Yes.
strategic plans around it, I would love to talk more about it.
So we have a bit of a proposed calendar, which we're going to talk about during the board governance training, which is scheduled for this Saturday at 8 a.m. And all of those topics that have been raised or presented will be addressed. And we can make sure if we're missing anything else, add those as well.
Okay. And then one last thing that I wanted to highlight is what's not on tonight's agenda. It's usually the item before adjournment of the regular meeting, and that is the recap of the meeting. As you know, we are trying to make our meetings a little more efficient, and it seemed as if doing a recap of the meeting was not necessary. So we dropped it from this one. Can you guys live with that? Okay.
Absolutely.
Excellent. All right. In that case, the next item on our agenda is adjournment. Can I have a motion, please?
I move. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Abstain.
Motion carries.
Thank you all.
Sorry, Carol. I think, does it happen at the end of the summer? What were the gaps?